How can they do this to us?
He's my dad now. I've got to go.
I think I got interested in acting at school.
Cut.
I found myself getting parts, and I found that I could, these voices would come out of me, and I found I could, if I walked in a certain way, I could create a character, and it was kind of a magical process that I didn't particularly understand or rationalize. I found when opening night came, I had a sort of a character, and the character lived almost independently of myself, and this was fantastically interesting. I'm a woefully undertrained actor, but I think I can act. And this is just something that you have or you don't. During the 70s, I worked for 7 or 8 years at the National Film Unit in Wellington.
Yes, folks, this is an inimitable group of entertainers who've come from far, far away just to entertain you here.
Made
in Christchurch,
8 or 9 films of my own. I haven't seen any of these films for 10 years. I suspect most of them are pretty embarrassing. But I think there are probably 1 or 2 moments in them that may stand up to a second glance. My time at the film unit was not entirely wasted in terms of what I do now, because I like the craft of film acting. It's like making a patchwork quilt, you know, you're doing this little square today and that little square tomorrow, and eventually it all knits up. Now, because I have a background of editing, and I understand continuity, and I understand how to knit together a performance, this has considerably helped my background as a filmmaker. I haven't worked in New Zealand since 1978. I've spent a lot of time in places like this, in hotels, and a lot of different countries. But I find myself inevitably returning to New Zealand because that's where I was brought up, and I built a house back in New Zealand, and I go back there when I can, and I would spend more time there if I could. My great-grandfather was an Irishman. He got here just in time for the gold rush in 1860, I think. Neill and Company were general merchants, and they did everything, basically. He became quite rich quite quickly. I think Otago is where I feel most at home, and I don't know whether that's to do with my being brought up here or whether it's to do with just having a particular affinity for this type of landscape. I like places that are open and where there's a lot of sky, and I feel sort of free down here. We like to delude ourselves into thinking that it's God's little acre. It's not really. But it's a marvelous little place in its own way. And I'm stuck with it, for better or for worse.
Don't look back, it will only bring you down.
I got a call. No, I got a letter from Roger Donaldson from Hong Kong. He said, I'm making a feature film with Ian Mune. It's called Sleeping Dogs. It's based on Carl Stead's book, which we'd like you to read. And we're going to shoot this early next year, and we want you to do it. And I was astonished. Apart from Michael Saracen, who was the director of photography, no one else on the film had made a feature film before, so we were completely at sea, really.
Hey! Stop that man! Stop him!
I haven't seen this film for 15 years or something. And I remember looking at it and thinking, there's a lot of this film that I find deeply embarrassing, and I'm just terrible in it. But there's 3 or 4 little scenes which I wasn't too bad, and that's enough to want to go on and get better at it.
Smith!
Eh? Repeat it.
Hell of a place for a picnic. Have you seen a pig cap? I've lost it in the bush somewhere. Deb.
I came here in 1979, not by design, but by accident. I'd done Sleeping Dogs, and I was sent here to do some publicity for that film. And I landed in Melbourne. We had a press conference, which was a disaster. Only one reporter turned up, and he was from the sports pages. And he wasn't interested in the film, so we just got drunk. But while I was here, I was approached by Gillian Armstrong to come up to Sydney to do a screen test for my brilliant career. So I caught the train from Melbourne, and I travelled up through this astonishing country. It astonished me. I mean, it was much more beautiful than I'd ever expected. I was immediately riveted by it. I thought it was quite... When you're used to the New Zealand landscape, it's startlingly different and very beautiful in a very different way to New Zealand. And I thought on that train trip that this was really somewhere I'd like to come back to. And I got to Sydney and I did the screen test, and the screen test went well. And I found myself in this Australian film, and I was over here about 4 or 5 weeks later. I resigned my job at the film unit and sold the house and came to Australia.
That's it, folks. It's going to be light in 35 minutes. We need to go into mad controlled panic mode.
When I find myself in some god-awful part of the world like Warsaw or something like that, and I'm a bit homesick and a bit miserable, and thoughts percolate through of home, usually it's some sort of image like bush and beaches and shimmering Hauraki Gulf, blue water. But actually, in fact, that's all sort of fantasy country for me. And this stark, quite brutal South Island mountain landscape is really much more real to me. And this is the sort of country that we used to come to when I was a kid, and it's really much more to do with myself. And you know, this building, it seems to me, these sharers' quarters and wool sheds, those sort of buildings in the South Island are really New Zealand for me. A completely architect-free zone, you know, it's a beautiful little building. And in its own way, to me, it's as beautiful as a church. I've been working here in Australia for nearly 2 years, I think. And I got a call from overseas, from Switzerland, and this rather cultured voice said, this is James Mason, and you don't know me, but I know your work, and I think you should be working overseas. And I've been talking to people about you, and I'm sending you an air ticket, and I want you to come to England next week and test for a film. So I couldn't very well say no. And that's where my career sort of broadened out into a kind of an international thing.
Talk about stupid. What a nut. Did you see it? That's my husband.
Some characters just jump off the page, and some characters are very, very elusive. The elusive ones are usually the people that I get offered.
Smile, darling.
I was about to do Michael Chamberlain, and I'd done a lot of research on him, and I still didn't know what to do. I was lost. And I confided this in Meryl, and I said, what about you? Do you know what you're going to do? And she said, I haven't any idea what I'm going to do. And she said, furthermore, I never do.
Un ciel pommelé.
I thought I was alone in this.
What do we call it?
A mackerel sky. I don't have to go on. I'll stay if you like. I acknowledge that there is such a thing as sex appeal on the screen. I certainly wouldn't attribute that quality to myself or to my work. But it is, I see that in other people. When I see myself, I'm just covered in confusion and embarrassment. There is a sort of intangible that goes with certain people on screen. If that's true of me, then I'm lucky. I've sometimes played people who are sort of a little bit caddish when it comes to women. I don't know why. In The Umbrella Woman, the first time you see this character, he gets off the train and he sort of oozes up to Rachel Ward. I'm not getting off the train thinking, no, I'm going to be sexy. I'm getting off the train thinking, this is just disgusting what this character is doing, actually.
Anyone ever tell you you've got beautiful eyes?
One of the things that's been very gratifying for me in working overseas is the caliber of people that I've been lucky enough to work with. Acting's a bit like sex. It's much more fun to do it with somebody else. And the better the other person is at it, the better you're going to be at it. Again, rather like sex. Shouldn't have said that. But someone like Meryl Streep, who's obviously consummately good at what she does, it's a great pleasure to work with because it sort of lifts your own game. Having said that, I don't think I was particularly good. In Plenty, I was a little bit daunted by the experience, particularly the bed scene. It's a pretty scary thing when you hardly know the woman. To rub up against Meryl Streep on the sort of second day of meeting her. I never fail to be astonished at the sort of people I get to work with. I get so angry and frustrated, you know, because I hardly even knew her. I hardly even took any notice of her, you know.
And the winner is Sam Neill.
Sam Neill rose to prominence as a leading actor in the 1979 Australian feature My Brilliant Career. And since then his own career has been truly international, with leading roles in feature films and major TV series in America, the United Kingdom, Poland, France and Germany, as well as two recent Australian films, Phil Noyce's Dead Calm and Fred Skepsi's Evil Angels.
Thank you very much. When I get off the plane in New Zealand, I always get a tremendous rush of satisfaction with the air and the light and seeing people that I know and love. I definitely would like to direct again. It's a logical thing to do and I'd very much like to do it. Sort of itching to get my hands on it sometime. And I think the stories that interest me are more to do with where I come from. New Zealand / Australia. And I think one of the reasons I enjoy working in Australia particularly is because of those cultural similarities and kinships that Australia and New Zealand have, and these are relationships that I understand, I think.